This video is not about your cozy, feel-good adventures. We're talking about the games that hate you. From cruel mechanics to straight-up unfair boss fights, these RPGs don't hold your hand. They slap it away. So buckle up, because today we're diving into 10 of the most brutally difficult RPGs ever made. Most strategy RPGs like to ease you in, but Fire Emblem Thracia does the opposite. It throws you into chaos from the very first mission and never lets up. You're constantly low on supplies, surrounded by stronger enemies, and forced to make tough choices just to keep your units alive. And if you think grinding or playing it safe will save you, think again. One of the first things that sets Thracia apart is how much it strips away your sense of control. Maps are filled with hidden enemies, ambushes, fog of war, and traps that can wipe your best units before you even understand what's happening. Enemies can capture your characters, steal your weapons, and even escape with key story items. And if that happens, it's usually your fault because the game doesn't explain much. The fatigue system adds another layer of pressure. Use a unit too much and they'll be forced to sit out the next battle no matter how important they are. This means you can't rely on the same core team. You're constantly rotating units, even if they're underleveled, and figuring out how to survive with what you've got. Recruiting new characters isn't simple either. Some of the best units are hidden behind specific actions, obscure dialogue chains, or crazy side objectives in the middle of already difficult maps. And if you mess it up, you might lose a future ally without even realizing it until much later. But what really breaks most players is the game's permadeath. One mistake, one crit from an enemy you didn't see coming, and your favorite unit is gone forever. Combine that with limited saves and unpredictable enemy AI, and it turns every map into a nerve-wracking test of strategy and willpower. This isn't just one of the hardest Fire Emblem games, it's one of the most brutal RPGs ever made. But for the players who can push through its relentless difficulty, there's a real sense of accomplishment, because if you can beat Thracia, you can probably beat anything. Ys Oath in Felghana may look like your average action RPG, but once you dive in, the game makes it very clear. It's not here to play nice. Every enemy is fast, every boss is aggressive, and the window for mistakes is razor thin. You're not handed victory just for showing up. You earn it through quick reflexes, smart positioning, and learning patterns like your life depends on it. Because in this game, it usually does. The combat is fast-paced and relentless. Adol's attacks connect instantly, and you can chain basic slashes with jumping strikes and aerial combos without missing a beat. There's no stamina bar holding you back, so combat stays fast and aggressive from start to finish. Movement is tight, and the hitboxes are super precise, which makes dodging feel incredibly satisfying when you pull it off at the last second. Enemies don't just stand around either, they constantly chase you down and force you to stay mobile. The game also features a boost system that temporarily increases your damage and defense once you fill a special meter. Timing when to use it can turn the tide of a tough boss fight, but if you waste it too early, you're in trouble, especially when bosses start chaining brutal attacks that cover the entire screen. Also, some fights feel almost like bullet hell shooters, where one mistake leads to a chain reaction of damage that ends your run in seconds. You can't stock healing items, so you've got to grab them when they drop mid-fight, and that's usually when things are at their worst. And don't count on grinding to save you. Leveling up helps a bit, but if you don't learn how the game works, you're toast. But what takes all that intensity to the next level is the soundtrack. The moment a boss fight kicks in, the music explodes with shredding guitars, fast drum beats, and epic melodies that make even your 10th death feel like a trailer moment. Most of the tracks are rearranged versions of classics from the original game, and they're handled by the Falcom sound team JDK, which is basically legendary in the world of RPG soundtracks. Shiren the Wanderer might look like a cute old-school RPG, but it's one of the most unforgiving dungeon crawlers ever made. It runs on a roguelike system, and each dungeon is randomly generated, so you can't memorize layouts or enemy positions. You're walking into the unknown every single time, and even something as simple as walking into a room can trigger chaos, because you never know if it's filled with sleeping monsters or pressure plates waiting to mess you up. Combat works on a turn-based grid system, but here's the catch. Everything happens at the same time. When you move, enemies move. When you attack, they react. You can use terrain to your advantage, like luring enemies into choke points or using items to escape tight spots, but none of it's handed to you. Some enemies have unique abilities that completely change how you approach them, like splitting into copies or draining your resources mid-fight. And since you can only see a few tiles ahead, combat is as much about managing the unknown as it is about planning your next hit. Inventory management is also a constant battle. You can only carry so much, and deciding what to keep, what to throw away, or when to use a rare item becomes a huge part of the strategy. Some items are cursed, and others have hidden effects that can ruin your run if you're not careful. You might find a powerful sword only to discover it's actually lowering your defense with every hit. And one of the most unique mechanics in Shiren the Wanderer is the fusion system, where you can combine weapons and shields to pass on special abilities. This turns gear into long-term investments, especially if you're lucky enough to find a blacksmith in town or inside a dungeon. You can strengthen a weapon's power, add traits like confusion resistance, or even give it elemental properties, stacking bonuses that carry over across multiple runs if you manage to store them safely. That's right, there's a storage system that lets you bank your best gear for future runs, but here's the catch. You can only store items if you manage to leave the dungeon alive. So even when you find something amazing, you have to decide if it's worth going deeper or if it's time to bail and stash your loot while you still can. Devil Survivor doesn't waste time trying to ease you into its nightmare. The whole game takes place over 7 in-game days and every single decision matters. You're stuck in a locked-down Tokyo, crawling with demons, military checkpoints, and panicking civilians. And the only way out is to either survive the chaos or change the rules of the world itself. It's a mix of grid-based tactics and classic turn-based RPG combat, but with layers of pressure that most games wouldn't dare throw at you. The game runs on a time management system. Every event you choose eats up precious hours, and once the clock moves forward, there's no going back. Skip a scene, miss a conversation, or make the wrong call, and you might lose a character forever. Some allies can die just because you didn't show up in time, and others may turn on you based on your moral choices. It's constant tension where even exploring a side event could screw up your main path. And since there are multiple endings tied to who you save, what you believe, and how you fight, every route feels completely different. The combat system blends tactical movement with turn-based battles, and it demands way more planning than it looks at first glance. Each human character leads a small team of 2 demons, and once the fight starts, it's all about turn efficiency and exploiting enemy weaknesses. Land a crit or hit an elemental weak point and you'll earn bonus turns, but mess up and the enemy gets the upper hand. Demons are constantly evolving through a fusion system that lets you combine 2 creatures into a stronger one, carrying over skills in the process. It sounds simple, but there's a ton of strategy behind it. Certain demons are locked behind fusion recipes that only open up after specific plot points or level thresholds. Others can be bought back from your compendium, but that costs money, and money is tight from start to finish. Then there's the skill crack system, which lets you steal abilities from enemies, but only if the right character gets the final blow on a specific target. And some of them completely change the way a character plays, giving access to powerful passive abilities, elemental resistances, or devastating spells. Quick break. If you're enjoying the video so far, hit that like button and drop a comment with your own picks for the hardest RPGs you've played. Bonus points if it made you rage quit at least once. Seriously, comments help a ton with the algorithm and keep the channel alive with more videos like this. And yes, I actually check and reply to every single one. Oh, and if you haven't subscribed yet, come on, don't leave me talking to myself out here. The Last Remnant is one of those RPGs that looks simple on the surface but turns into absolute chaos the moment the tutorial ends. You don't control just a handful of characters like in most turn-based games. You manage entire squads called unions, and each one acts like a mini-party within your army. That means you're giving orders to groups, not individuals, and hoping they execute the plan without falling apart. The game throws you into massive battles early on, with dozens of units clashing at once, and no easy way to predict how things will go. The command system is what really messes with your head. You don't pick specific actions like attack or heal. Instead, you choose vague strategies like keep your HP up or attack with mystic arts, and the game decides the exact moves based on the situation, the units, and even their current morale. Sometimes it works beautifully, and other times it feels like your squad just forgot how to fight. Morale plays a huge role too. It's a tug-of-war bar at the top of the screen that swings back and forth based on how well you're doing. High morale boosts your offense and defense, but if it drops too low, your squads start getting shredded fast. Enemy unions can flank you, interrupt your attacks, or unleash full-scale special moves. And since battles can stretch on for a long time, managing your momentum becomes just as important as your strategy. Then there's the customization system, which is deep but overwhelming. Every character in your party develops on their own terms, and you don't get full control over how they grow. Instead of you assigning skills or weapons directly, they'll constantly ask for materials to craft gear or upgrade abilities. And if you prioritize the wrong character, you can accidentally lock yourself out of powerful builds without realizing it. But the worst part is the battle rank system, which is the game's hidden difficulty slider that goes up as you fight more battles. On paper, it sounds like a cool idea, but in practice, enemies get stronger and start using advanced skills and formations. But your characters might not be ready if you've been grinding without developing their abilities the right way. Dragon Quest II might look simple on the surface, but it's one of the most punishing RPGs from the 8-bit era. It drops the charming tone and balanced pacing of the first game, and replaces it with brutal encounters, massive open areas, and a steep difficulty curve that kicks in fast. This game doesn't care if you're lost, underleveled, or broke. You either figure it out or you get sent back to your last save with half your gold gone. One of the biggest challenges comes from how the game handles exploration. You're dropped into a huge world with barely any direction. Towns, caves, and key items are scattered across the map with little guidance. And because random encounters are non-stop, just walking from one place to another can feel like a war of attrition. You'll be fighting through waves of enemies just to reach a dungeon, only to realize you weren't supposed to be there yet. And then it's either backtrack and grind, or wipe and try again. The party system is new to the series here, but it comes with its own frustrations. You start off alone and eventually recruit 2 more party members, but they don't arrive quickly. Until then, you're stuck fighting groups of enemies solo, which is way tougher than it sounds. And even when you do have a full team, the balance is rough. One character is a tank, the other is a glass cannon with limited magic, and healing is often unreliable. Dungeons are another nightmare. They're long, confusing, and filled with traps and dead ends. There's no in-game map, so you better have good memory or be ready to draw one yourself. Some paths loop endlessly unless you take the exact right route, and enemies inside hit way harder than the ones outside. If you don't come prepared with tons of healing items and escape spells, you're probably not making it out alive. From the very beginning, Tactics Ogre throws you into a brutal civil war filled with betrayals, tough choices, and consequences that actually matter. Every decision you make ripples through the story, changing who lives, who dies, and who even stays on your side. Combat in Tactics Ogre is grid-based and turn-driven, but it's way more complex than just moving and attacking. Every unit has a turn order based on their agility, which means faster characters act more often, and planning around that is key. Elevation plays a huge role, as attacking from higher ground boosts your damage, and projectiles can get blocked by obstacles or miss entirely if the angle's off. Enemies are relentless and smart, so they don't just charge in blindly. They go for your healers, control the terrain, and force you to adapt fast. Each class brings its own set of mechanics, and some of them, like archers and mages, can feel overpowered early on, until you realize enemies have access to the same tricks. And if you're not careful, area attacks might hurt your own squad too. The game also uses a system called union levels in some versions, which limits how far you can grind ahead, forcing you to rely on smart tactics instead of brute force. There's even a card mechanic mid-battle, where stat-boosting cards spawn on the map and grabbing them can swing the fight instantly. What makes Tactics Ogre really stand out is the way it blends story and gameplay. Key battles can lock you into certain routes. Characters can leave your party permanently depending on your choices, and some recruits only show up if you take very specific paths. And just when you think you've seen everything, the game hits you with the World Tarot system. Once you finish the game, it lets you jump back to earlier points in the story timeline without losing your progress. But the genius is that you keep your current party, levels, gear, and most of your progress while exploring different narrative branches. That means you don't have to replay the whole game from scratch just to see how things would have played out if you made a different decision during a key moment. Vagrant Story drops you into the cursed city of Leomond with almost no direction, no party members to rely on, in an outfit that's highly questionable to say the least, and a combat system that feels more like a puzzle than a fight. You play as Ashley Riot, a risk-breaker caught in a web of political conspiracies and supernatural horror, and from the first hour, it's clear this isn't your typical action RPG. Combat is fully real-time but with a twist. You lock onto enemies and can target specific body parts to cripple or disable them. But there's a catch. Every attack raises your risk level, and the higher it goes, the less accurate your attacks become, while enemies start landing crits like it's their job. So managing risk becomes just as important as dealing damage. The game's crafting and weapon system is a whole other beast. You're not just looting stronger gear. You're breaking down weapons, fusing components, and customizing blades with different affinities to match enemy types. And even armor follows the same logic. It's deep, it's brutal, and the game barely explains how any of it works. The dungeons themselves are no joke either. Full of traps, environmental puzzles, and mini-bosses that test every system you've learned so far. You're always low on resources, and healing is limited unless you backtrack or find rare items. There are no shops, no towns, and no grinding your way to safety. But what makes Vagrant Story so brutal is that it doesn't give you any lifelines. The game throws you into deep, complex systems with barely any tutorials, no clear path forward, and no second chances if you screw up. Weapons degrade, enemies resist certain damage types, and even the best gear can feel useless if you don't understand how affinities work. So if you don't plan your gear setups with precision, you'll eventually hit a wall, stuck in a dungeon, out of options, and with no easy way to recover or backtrack. Saga Scarlet Grace is one of those games that doesn't care how many RPGs you've played before. It's built different, and it makes sure you feel that from the moment you hit start. There's no traditional overworld, no random battles, no fixed progression. Instead, you get tossed into an open structure where exploration is all about making choices and dealing with the consequences. You pick one of 4 main characters, and from there, the story unfolds in a totally different way depending on who you are, what you do, and where you decide to go. The game doesn't guide you. It expects you to figure things out on your own, and that's exactly what makes it so challenging. The real meat of the game is its combat system, which feels like it was designed by someone who thinks pain builds character. It uses a timeline mechanic where both allies and enemies are placed in order of action, and the goal is to mess with that timeline in your favor. Delay enemy actions, cancel their moves, or line up your own team to trigger powerful united attacks. If you manage to wipe out an enemy that sits between two of your characters on the timeline, those two can link up for a bonus move, and if you chain it right, you can drag in the rest of your squad for a full team beatdown. And instead of traditional leveling and the usual XP grind, characters grow based on how you use them in battle. Stats increase randomly based on the roles they play and the situations they survive. Use a greatsword and you'll start unlocking new greatsword techniques. Focus on magic and you might trigger a flashy new spell mid-fight. These sparks happen randomly, which keeps things unpredictable. But here's the twist. The more battles you fight, the stronger the enemies become. So if you're out there trying to grind endlessly like in a normal RPG, the game punishes you for it. You might end up with a few new abilities, sure, but now even basic enemies hit like mini-bosses. At first glance, Yggdra Union looks like a colorful, anime-style tactics game. But underneath the bright visuals is a brutal, unforgiving system that doesn't care if you're new or experienced. But the original GBA version? That one didn't mess around. It was brutally difficult and completely unforgiving, turning every small mistake into a major setback. And the hard mode in newer versions was designed to recreate that exact same experience. Combat in Yggdra Union plays out like a blend of card strategy and tactical positioning. And if you don't fully understand how it works, the game will chew you up. You don't just move units and attack. You build unions by placing characters in specific formations based on their gender, with male and female units forming different attack patterns. That alone forces you to constantly think about positioning, because if your formation's off, you might end up going into a fight without half your squad. And once combat starts, battles are automatic, but you can influence them with timed button presses and special card skills. Each of these cards controls how far you can move, how powerful your attack is, and what abilities you can trigger. And once used, that card is gone for the rest of the chapter. Instead of using traditional health points, the game runs on a morale system, which represents each unit's stamina and will to fight. And once it hits 0, they're knocked out for the rest of the mission. What makes it intense is that morale doesn't just drop from losing fights. It also takes a hit when you're defending or even winning badly. If your unit barely scrapes through a battle, they might still lose a chunk of morale, leaving them vulnerable in the next clash. And here's where it gets tricky. Your main character's morale acts as a kind of shared health pool for your whole army. If they fall, it's game over, no matter how many allies are still standing. But all of that? That's just on normal difficulty. When you crank it up to hard mode, the one that mirrors the original GBA experience, things get seriously out of hand, as it removes most of the quality of life tweaks from later ports and strips the game down to its raw, unbalanced core. Enemies have stronger stats, better AI, and more brutal formations. Healing items are rare, equipment breaks faster, and unit upgrades take way longer to feel meaningful. And the enemy always feels stronger, better positioned, and one mistake away from wiping your progress. Guys, quick reminder, this is actually part 2 of the series on the toughest RPGs out there. And trust me, one of the most painful ones I've ever seen is waiting for you in part 1, which I'm leaving right here on the screen. Just don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment on both videos to help your buddy Sage keep the lights on.